Hey, happy Friday. This week, the next PixelBook got leaked and it's apparently running Android. Microsoft had a series of really unusual announcements at Ignite, and Huawei announced their first ever image sensor. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. This video was sponsored by Incogni. Okay, for my first story of the week, Android headlines reported that the Google Pixel laptop is in development, and meanwhile Android Authority reported that Google is turning ChromeOS into Android, which is what will be running on top of the new Pixel laptop. Apparently long-term Android might completely replace ChromeOS on these large screens for Google, and if that happens, that would be a pretty big deal. Development on the Pixel laptop has reportedly been greenlit, which means it's not just a prototype. It is codenamed Snowy, and it offers some reasonably high-end hardware, as the team is apparently comparing it internally to laptops like the MacBook Pro, Microsoft Surface laptop, and so on. Could be nice. As a reminder, the last Google Pixelbook was revealed in 2017 for $999, and then the Pixelbook 2 just never emerged, so this would follow that. Google is reportedly working on improved keyboard and mouse support for Android, external monitor support, multiple desktop support, and also the full desktop version of the Chrome browser, which is really quite interesting, plus also the previously reported details like Chrome extension support and the terminal to run Linux apps on Android. Kinda fun. They apparently also want to better take on iPads with this new unified approach, which all sounds great until you realize how much of a mess Google can sometimes be. We've just received another set of leaks that say that the company is cancelling the Pixel Tablet 2 because they don't expect to make money with it, so they're basically walking away from their own tablet ambitions. Also, like 2 years ago, The Verge reported that Google completely dismissed its whole Pixelbook team, so they're really just flip-flopping around, and there's not a very coherent long-term strategy, it seems. Anyway, in my opinion, Samsung DeX could weirdly become one of the main winners of Android on desktops, because improved keyboard and mouse support plus better desktop apps could be a really nice upgrade for DeX. And in all this switching, I'm afraid that the primary thing that made ChromeOS really special, which was its simplicity, might be gone after the switch was made, so I don't know if this will be a net positive or a negative. Anyway, for my second story of the week, Microsoft held its big annual event for IT pros called Ignite, and they had some really interesting announcements. The one thing that got a lot of people talking was something called Windows 365 Link, which is a $350 mini PC that's purpose-built for streaming Windows from the cloud. It is coming in April, and while many people compared this to the Mac Mini, for example, it's specifically aimed at enterprise users, millions of which specifically want to pay for a device that employees cannot install or store anything on at all. In the enterprise, all your data are belonging to us. Funnily enough, they didn't even disclose what Intel processor this machine runs. It only has 8 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage, and companies will of course also need a monthly subscription for Windows 365. So there's that. Anyway, beside the computer, Microsoft talked a lot about Copilot Studio, which lets companies build and deploy AI agents into the enterprise. Those can then autonomously go and complete tasks, which even includes third-party agents from companies like Adobe, SAP, and Workday. Beside that, the Windows Resiliency Initiative was announced, which is designed to stop something like Cloudflare causing massive outages by changing how security update hot patches are handled. Reporters like Tom Warren found that Microsoft made a special purple and blue Surface colorway for its employees, which is very pretty. And the company also announced that you can look at a Windows computer and stream 3 different monitors of it to a Quest 3 or 3S starting in December. This is of course basically a replica of how Apple lets you seamlessly stream your Mac desktop to a Vision Pro, but now with Windows and a Quest. To be honest, I've already tried streaming a desktop UI over to my Quest 3 and I thought the resolution just wasn't high enough, but pretty cool nonetheless. Okay, and for my third story of the week, Huawei has just announced it made its very own self-developed image sensor. Its name translates to the Red Maple image sensor, and it's a 1.6 megapixel unit. That sounds weirdly low resolution. That's because this isn't a primary image sensor like Sony and Samsung make, but rather one dedicated to spectral imaging, which is specifically for capturing colors accurately. So on the Mate 70 that this is supposed to launch on, it sits here, and it should be used as a secondary sensor that adds color info to the main sensors. This kind of sensor is purpose-built for measuring colors accurately, which should be particularly helpful for skin tones, and given the focus on red in the example photos and also in the name, which is usually the color that image sensors struggle with the most, I guess that fixing inaccurate red tones is one of the major goals. So hardly a world-changing thing for now, but Huawei making image sensors could be the start of something pretty big. Okay, and for a release monitor, we'll start with Sony's new flagship camera called the Alpha 1 Mark II. This is an update with fairly small tweaks like better stabilization and autofocus that uses a dedicated AI chip, and the one big jump is the much nicer screen that can tilt in 4 axes now. Next, Amazon launched the new Echo Show 21, which has a huge 21-inch 1080p screen for $400, along with a built-in smart home hub. And this size is particularly funny given that Apple is reported to have a tiny 6-inch screen on their competitor in comparison. Anyway, and our last release this week is the Nubia Z70 Ultra, which comes with the usual flagship specs, and also with a brand new and improved under-display selfie camera. Looking at Vincent Zhang's video, which I've linked to down below, the screen seems pretty incredible, and I actually think that the selfies look pretty crisp too. I wish this technology was more common. Okay, and as for our brief, we have to start with some highlights of the Department of Justice's pretty wild plan to break up Google. First, Google must promptly and fully divest Chrome, which just wow. There's a mention of forcing Google to divest Android, aka selling it, unless it stops the self-preferencing across its various services, and preferential treatment and payments are prohibited for search too, so Mozilla and Apple could indeed lose their Google revenue. Funnily enough, Google countered by saying that this would, quote, literally require us to install not one, but 2 separate choice screens before you could access Google search on a Pixel phone you bought. I don't think a choice screen for your default search engine and your default browser is like a huge deal in a newly bought device, but either way, keep in mind that of course the US is about to change a government very soon, and so all of this might or might not happen. Okay, next, Google has released a native Google Drive desktop app for Windows on ARM. Finally, Signal, my favorite messaging app, just got an ARM native client as well, and so did Blender apparently, at least in a kind of beta version. That's a pretty big week for Windows on ARM, and while some of this worked in emulation before, I did find Signal, for example, to be occasionally a little bit laggy, and so this being native now is pretty cool. Meanwhile, also in software updates, Android 16 is now available for first testers via a first developer preview, though of course there's nothing much that's user-facing to care about just yet. And a feature that users will care about is that WhatsApp is finally getting voice message transcripts over the coming weeks. These will be generated on the devices of the users themselves, and I hope that more messaging apps will get this soon too. And still with software, Rabbit has now released its Teach mode in beta for all R1 users. Oh, and if you're wondering, your screen is not broken, they just decided to demo this whole new feature by filming a CRT monitor and then I think also downsampling the video, so there's that. So since you can't actually see what's going on in the demo, I'll just tell you that in theory, Teach mode lets you kind of click through a website, have Rabbit look at what you're doing, and then replicate that with a voice command, which I guess is cool. Meanwhile, in sad news, Royole, the makers of the Royole FlexPi, the world's first foldable phone, went bankrupt. Oh well. And in insane news, a new study this week revealed that anyone can buy data tracking US soldiers and spies to nuclear vaults and brothels in Germany. And that is because a US data broker exposed their phone coordinates, which pretty much anyone can buy. And it's not just government officials being exposed. Another recent data broker also recently leaked 2.9 billion records of private people, including full names, current and past addresses, social security numbers, dates of birth, phone numbers, and more, which they were formerly selling to basically anyone willing to pay. Now, thankfully, in these countries at least, you can actually ask a data broker to remove the profile that they have on you, and apparently, at least in the last case that we talked about, this actually worked. Quote, the database does not contain information from individuals who use data opt-out services. Incogni's data removal service is what I use for this, and you can see that they have successfully deleted me from over 80 such data hoarders so far. Over 80, that is insane! Incogni finds which databases you are in, they send the requests on your behalf, they deal with objections, and they keep doing this even after you are deleted, so brokers don't just add you right back in after they deleted you, which is why this is a subscription. They support multiple email addresses and 3 physical addresses with a single subscription, plus they now also have family plans. Now, removal only necessarily works in countries that have legal frameworks for it, but as you've seen, that's a pretty good selection already. So to sign up, be sure to use my code FridayCheckout to get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. That is incogni.com/FridayCheckout for 60% off, which is also linked down below, and I'll see you next Friday.